Welcome to the blog post module. In this module, we are going to cover the blog post essentials, including blog post formats, evergreen versus trending topics, share triggers, how to actually write the post, and how to create images for it. So first, let's take a look at the different blog formats. There are how-to posts. These are a great way to provide value to the end user and teach them something they're struggling with or something that they've always wanted to know. We've seen tons of these. For example, how to teach kids to tie their shoes or how to get 10,000 followers on Instagram. Next are aggregation or best of posts. This is another really simple way to provide value to your end user without having to do too much work. For example, put together a list of your favourite coffee machines or favourite destinations for couples. With these, you want to put the best item at the end to keep readers interested throughout the entire post. And you want to keep your reasons compact and interesting. This is a bit similar to the listicle format, but you want to put a bit more thought and reasoning into why these have made the list. The next format is listicles. Again, we have seen tons of these. Tend to be 15 to 20 items, and you really can list anything. There are millions of examples out there. It can be items, destinations, reasons why, whatever. And this is a great blog format for beginner copywriters. Think of the classic BuzzFeed post. You don't need any brain cells to read it. The reader switches off, zones out, and just drifts through the piece, having a nice time. So for example, 22 Tumblr posts that made us wet ourselves laughing. The next format are interviews or behind the scenes. This is a great way for businesses to show off to their customers, but it's not always that great for customers to read it. The most important part of this format is to keep it interesting, provide genuine value to the end user, and break up the text. Keep the flow going with lots of images, quotes, infographics, videos, anything you can think of. Next is marketing campaigns. Again, another really good way for businesses to bring attention to their sales, especially themed ones. So for example, write a post about ugly Christmas sweaters to bring attention to a jumper sale. And this isn't necessarily a format. There's loads of different formats you could follow. Listicles could work well, a how-to post could work well, an aggregation post of all their sweaters might be a little bit too much of a hard sell, but in some situations that could also work. A behind the scenes post might work. You would have to work very hard to make it interesting though. Keep it very fun and very creative. Product use case posts. This is when you tell the story of a customer who used your product and got great results. This works really well for some products and not at all for others. For example, for a blog post title, it could be how this bedroom musician got signed with only 6 months experience, and then talk about the course that got them where they needed to be. But you can't really do the same for kettles. For example, how this woman became CEO with only 6 months experience, and then attribute that to her kettle making a perfect cup of tea every morning. I don't know, maybe if you're really funny or really creative, you could make it work. I know that I couldn't though. And like behind the scenes posts, you want to really focus on readability and keeping it interesting for the end user. News and article posts. I don't know if I'm the only one who thought this, but I always thought that news articles were supposed to be dull. Maybe because I always got so bored and confused reading articles by newspapers like the Financial Times, so I just naturally thought they were meant to be boring and confusing. The truth is, they're not at all. I was just completely the wrong target audience, and if you had given those articles to someone who fully understands the jargon, they're actually pretty interesting. And this is something I have to keep in mind when writing news or article posts. The aim of the post is to get all the information across in the most concise and interesting way you can. So instead of just listing all the facts, you want to drop them randomly throughout the story so people learn without having to read a bulk of information. And again, similar format to behind the scenes posts. You want to focus on readability and keeping it interesting for the end user. Go-to guidebooks. These are the mother of all posts. Not great for beginner content writers, but a great goal to work up towards. These need to be bursting with information. If the reader has any relevant questions at the end, you've failed your job. This post needs to tell them everything they need to do whatever it is that the post is writing about. It's a similar format to the how-to post, but you want to scale it up. When you're dealing with this much information, you need to be really good at taking a massive information and making it enjoyable to read. Break it up, keep it concise, and keep it interesting. For example, the definitive guide to snowboarding. So when I read this post, I need to know where to go, what kit I need, how to snowboard, including tips for beginners, intermediate and advanced. I need to know how to do jumps. I need to know how to go off piste. I need to know how to carve. I need to know the easiest tricks working up to the hardest tricks. I need to know how to use a button lift. I need to know how to use a chairlift. And I need to know things that I didn't even know that I needed to know, if that makes sense. So for example, if I get to the end of this post and I don't know how to turn, or I don't even make it to the end because it was too much information, it was too overwhelming and too boring, the writer has failed their job. Our last format example is case studies. Again, these are not ideal for beginners, but a great goal to work towards. Just like the guidebook, you need to take a lot of information and make it interesting. And on top of that, you need to conduct a case study. Say, for example, we tried every pair of tweezers so you don't have to. So 7 years ago, I was gifted an incredible pair of tweezers, the best I've ever used in my life. They have no branding on, I had no idea who sold them, and when I lost them, I didn't even know where to start, but I knew I didn't want crappy, cheap tweezers again. So I Googled best tweezers and this case study came up. And it was pretty perfect. They tested over 80 makes and models of tweezers and categorized them into slanted tip, pointed tip, etc. And then in each category, they explained in depth, but also kept it concise, why they chose the top 3 with big images of each of them. And then the runners-up got a slightly shorter explanation, and then the rest went on the naughty list with a reason explaining why. This case study was amazing. It took me about 3 minutes to find my perfect tweezers, but I imagine it took them about 3 months to test, categorize, and write up all of these tweezers. For each of these formats, it's really difficult to give specific rules to stick to. For example, a case study should always be over 2,000 words because it's completely subjective. Some case studies should be over 2,000 words and others shouldn't. There's just too many variables. What is it studying? Who is reading it? How much detail do they want? How much detail is necessary? Earlier, I said that listicles should be 15 to 20 items, and that's a really nice rule of thumb, but I break it all the time, as do BuzzFeed. Again, there's just so many variables. Say, for example, you are listing the best toothbrushes for dogs. That's pretty specific. Are there really 15 viable contenders for that? If there aren't, don't add extra ones just to hit the count. And equally, if you're listing funny tweets with no explanation needed, only 20 is going to feel a little bit unsatisfying, and I would personally go for a lot more. Personally, I really like following a strict layout, and if you are too, there is a way around this. I recommend doing some research and make a layout of your own to follow. For example, if you want to write an aggregation post about toasters targeted at students, then you need to find as many aggregation posts that you can about toasters or just any homeware appliances. And you need to ask yourself questions about them. How many toasters are they listing and how much are they writing about each one? Which ones are the most interesting and why? Then you want to find all the aggregation posts targeted at students that you can and ask yourself the same questions. Hopefully you're going to have the same answers popping up, and as you're doing this, you should get the same answers coming up again and again, and hopefully it should be quite obvious what guidelines to stick to. I've attached a blog format cheat sheet to this lesson. If you need a little bit more time getting to grips with these, feel free to download it now. Take a look at the examples for each one and the reasons why they make a great